we can say that the 20th century is the century of communism and has not finished yet. This in the two ways that communists attack Christianity. Classical Marxists with communist dictatorship leading to the Soviet Empire, and then cultural communism leading to the present day total moral and religious corruption of the West. So, main part of the talk was to show this filiation of abortion, free divorce, homosexuality, etc., to Marxist ideologies and models. So now we have to raise our eyes to a higher view and consider the same events from God's perspective, from God's viewpoint. That is to say, how communism and its more than 100 million victims fit into divine providence plan for humanity. So we can summarize what I will explain to you later, that both classical and cultural Marxists were both the most radical expression of a sin of direct revolt against God and God, the order that God put in the universe, similar to Lucifer's non-serviam. So the real filiation of communism is from Lucifer direct, and at the same time is the sin, but at the same time is the whip with which God punished and will still punish our own apostasy from the Christian civilization of our ancestors. So this is the key to understand Fatima in all its historical dimension and not just as a personal devotion. That could be another of Our Lady's devotion. So let's go to this second part of my talk. So Fatima as the interpretative key of the center of communism. I wrote this, and as you see, my English is quite poor. So probably you will notice some mistakes in the writing, because no one edited for me. So let's go and see what is the core of the message of Fatima. Our Lady appeared 6 times from the 13th of May to the 13th of October, but the main message was the 13th of July, as you know. And there was given the core of the message when Our Lady revealed this secret. So the secret divided in 3 parts: the vision of hell, the second explanation, and then the third secret of Fatima. So basically what Our Lady said to the seers: the war is going to end, because it was in the middle of World War I, but if people do not cease offending God, a worse one will break out. So you can already realize the situation in 1917 for us looks more or less like the Middle Ages, regarding morals. Families were still stable, people got married. Abortion only existed in the Soviet Union, as I mentioned to you, or actually started 1 year later. So look for us like a paradise. That situation, Our Lady already said that people were offending God, mainly because societies were not recognizing the 10 Commandments and God's law as the founding rock. They were already becoming secular, and divorce was already accepted, etc. So at that time already, people were offending God in such a way that Our Lady came to warn us about that. That is the very first point. So it's a kind of ascertainment of Our Lady of the situation at that time already. The second part, you see, when you see a night illuminated by an unknown light, know that this is the great sign given to you by God, that He is about to punish the world for its crimes. So the crimes are these sins of people offending God. So this, the ascertainment of the situation, and then a judgment. This is a sin, and this sin deserves to be punished, to be chastised. To prevent this, so Our Lady gives the possibility of not chastising humanity. To prevent this, I shall come to ask for the consecration of Russia to my Immaculate Heart and the communion of reparation the first Saturdays. She indeed came later, in 29, if I'm not mistaken, when Sister Lucy was in Tui, in Spain. And then she said, if my requests are heeded, a time of peace will be given to the world. If not, then Russia will spread its errors throughout the world, and there will be wars and persecutions to the Christian, the Pope, and the Bishop will have much to suffer, etc. So, you have the ascertainment of the situation, the warning and basically judgment of that situation deserves a punishment, the remedy is given then, and then a dramatic alternative. If my requests are heeded, there will be peace. If not, there will be a great chastisement. So now, which are the means that Our Lady gave to avoid the chastisement? The two types. Traditional means for any time, prayer and penance. And she insisted very much with the little shepherds for them to do sacrifices and to pray. And they actually started doing sacrifices and praying a lot after the apparition. And basically saying to people, you must pray and do penance. That is what we did just in the corner. We were doing penance under the rain and a little tired our feet, and we were praying, precisely to do what Our Lady was asking from us. But then, specific requests. 2, the consecration of Russia to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, and the communion of reparation on the first Saturdays. These were 2 specific requests only made at Fatima, the one to be fulfilled by the Pope in communion with all the bishops of the world, and the other by all the faithful. We are all recommended by Our Lady to do communion of reparation on the first Saturdays, 5 first Saturdays. And then a kind of pedagogic incentive to do prayer and penance and the communion of reparation the first Saturday. Our Lady revealed to the seers first, and then after, through the seers, to us, the secret of Fatima of the 13th of July 1917. It consisted in 3 parts. First, the vision of hell. You probably, all of you, know it. It is very impressive, at least in the Portuguese version, which is the original. You notice that it's so beautiful, the word she uses, Sister Lucy, that it's impossible for someone who received little education and was a peasant, really a total peasant like Sister Lucy, could compose such a beautiful text about terrible things. I don't know if it's in English. It gives the same character, the same idea. Well, definitely my reading of English will not give, it will not be poetic at all. But anyway, it's very impressive. Our Lady showed us a great sea of fire, which seemed to be under the earth. Planted in this fire were demons and souls in human form, like transparent burning embers, all blackened or burnished bronze, floating about in the conflagration, now raised into the air by the flames that issued from within themselves together with great clouds of smoke, now falling back on every side like sparks in a huge fire, without weight or equilibrium, and amid shrieks, you see shrieks? Shrieks, and groans of pain and despair, which horrified us and made us tremble with fear. You may, all of you, probably seen the pictures taken of the 3 seers after this apparition of hell. It's impressive. Their faces are horrified. And this is very interesting. Today, in the pulpits, they don't, or in the catechism, they don't speak about hell. They say, oh, we cannot terrify people with hell. No? How can you do it, particularly with little children? No? You cannot. Our Lady did that. No? Jacinta was 5 years old at that time. No? Why? Because if 7, 9, no? 7. You're right. And why? Because the fear of God, no? And the fear of punishment makes us to go on the straight line. You know? It's very supportive for us. You know? The spiritual writers, they say that the fear of God, or speaking about hell, is like when you are sewing. You know? You pass first the needle, you know? And then after the, how do you call the ribbon, how do you call the thread, no? So the thread remains, but first past the needle, you know? So the fear of God makes people wise. You know? Well, so that was the very first part of the secret. The second was this announcement of wars and persecutions because of the state, the sinful state of the world. If my requests are heeded, Russia will be converted and there will be peace. If not, she will spread her errors throughout the world, causing wars and persecutions of the church. The good will be martyred, the Holy Father will have much to suffer, various nations will be annihilated. So, it's the most dramatic prophecy. And then, the third part, which Sister Lucy, in a letter to Pope John Paul II in 1982, said it was a symbolic vision of the second part. You know? So it's a vision of destruction, martyrdom, and conversion. So the text given by Sister Lucy in the main part says, at the left of Our Lady and a little above, we saw an angel with a flaming sword in his left hand. Flashing, it gave out flames that looked as though they would set the world on fire. So it's basically because the situation of the world deserves this chastisement. But they died out in contact with the splendor that Our Lady radiated towards him from her right hand. So basically, the world was not being punished because Our Lady's intervention prevented the angel to punish the world. Pointing to the earth with his right hand, the angel cried out in a loud voice, penance, penance, penance. So this is really symbolic of the situation at the time. You know? The world is in a sinful situation, and God, Our Lady, wants that if they continue sinning, there will be a chastisement by the angel. So, to prevent this, penance. This is the present at the time. Then it's very interesting to see that the next part will be the future. God says, and we saw in an immense light that is God. So she didn't see directly like the first part. She was seeing Our Lady and the angel. In this part, she was not seeing directly, She was seeing in an immense light that is God, something similar to how people appear in a mirror when they pass in front of it. So basically they are seeing the future in God, because we cannot know the future, but God knows. So they were seeing in God the future. And what they saw? A bishop dressed in white. We had the impression that it was the Holy Father. You see how Sister Lucy was so peasant-like, and her education was so little, that she mixed the quotes with the parentheses. No? So you see that we had the impression that it was the Holy Father, really is in parentheses. When you add something and you put into parentheses, but she puts in between quotes, because she mixes things. No? So, a bishop dressed in white. Other bishops, priests, men and women religious, going up steep mountain, at the top of which there was a big cross of rough-hewn trunks, as of a cork tree with the bark. You know, in Portugal there are plenty of these cork trees. And so for her it was familiar. Before reaching there, the Holy Father passed through a big city, half in ruins and half trembling with halting step. So, earthquakes, no? And people already, and some already in ruins, afflicted with pain and sorrow. He prayed for the souls of the corpses he met on his way. If he prayed for the souls, that means they were not martyrs, because martyrs don't need our prayers, they are already in heaven. So these were just victims of the big chastisement. It could be diseases or earthquakes or something, or wars, no? Very dramatic, that killed all these people. So he prayed for the souls of the corpses. Having reached the top of the mountain, on his knees at the foot of the big cross, he was killed by a group of soldiers who fired bullets and arrows at him. And in the same way, there died, one after another, the other bishops, priests, men and women religious, and various lay people of different ranks and positions. So you see, it's a general killing of all these people going up. That gives the impression of a dramatic religious persecution. A kind of for sophisticated people with weapons, and less sophisticated, no, more primitive, with arrows. No? So you see two parts here: the kind of general chastisement for the world with these ruins, and specific punishment for Catholics themselves because of this persecution, where the Pope, the bishops, the religious people, and the lay people, all of them died. So this is what she saw basically in the future. So it's a most terrible description of what she gave. Beneath the two arms of the cross, there were two angels, each with a crystal aspersorium in his hand, in which they gather up the blood of the martyrs. So here you see, these are martyrs. It's different. They take the blood, and with it sprinkle the souls that were making their way to God. So here you have another element. Some people coming from far away, who probably were not yet even Catholics or converted, they were coming close to God and were sprinkled with this blood of the martyrs, and obviously converting. So here we have basically the idea that we pass from the silent apostasy of our West that renounced to its Christian past and adopted this Marxist, cultural Marxist philosophies, no? And will be punished, but then we go to a new civilization of these people coming from far away, no? And then this confirms what she has said already in the second part. In the end, my Immaculate Heart will triumph. So it's at the same time a message of tragedy, it's very tragic, and of hope, because people will convert and return to God. Unfortunately, the main one who should have taken this message seriously and made the center of all the efforts of evangelization were the popes, the bishops, and the clergy. And unfortunately, this wasn't the case. And first, they should have fulfilled the request that Our Lady made, that Russia be consecrated to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. This wasn't made by Pope Pius XI, who was the first one to receive this request coming from Sister Lucy. Wasn't made by Pope Pius XII. Pope Pius XII did a consecration of the world to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, but he didn't put Russia at the request of a Jesuit priest, Father Danis. This priest was a Dutch priest, and this Father Danis said, well, look, in the situation the world is now coming out of World War II, we need this, for the pacification of the world and the reconstruction of the world, we need Russia. And consecrating Russia will really cross the Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, so it's so politically incorrect, so to speak, no? This request that cannot be heavenly, cannot come from heaven. No? So you see, he saw the thing just from a mundane viewpoint, no? A worldly. And so the Pope listened to him and didn't consecrate. Finally, well, after John the 23rd, he opened the secret, and he said, it's not for me, it's for my successors. No? So I have nothing to do with that. Then Paul VI not even wanted to receive Sister Lucy and talk to her, because he didn't like these things of apparitions, etc., no? And people around. So it was only under Pope John Paul II, but after he was attacked, in the 13th of May, 1981, that a new consecration was made. There is controversy whether this consecration attended all the requests of Our Lady. Bishop Athanasius Schneider recently in an interview, he said that he was right behind the Pope during this ceremony, the 13th of May in 84, I think. And he said, well, I was listening perfectly. He went out of the text, in fact, and then he mentioned, and we consecrate to you, especially those nations that you have particularly in your heart. But he didn't mention nominally Russia. And Our Lady has said that had to be Russia mentioned. So, in the case. But after, John Paul II had the merit of having revealed the third secret that had been kept secret for 24 years after the date that Sister Lucy had said should be revealed in 1960. But when the Vatican revealed the secret, they managed to try to gloss over. You say gloss over in English, no? Yeah. Downplay the relevance, and taking away the quote apocalyptic quote unquote aspect of it. So they gave an optimistic official interpretation by the Vatican. First of all, we must affirm with Cardinal Sodano in Fatima has said that, the 13th of May of that year in 2000, the events to which the third part of the Secret of Fatima refers now seem part of the past. So don't worry, this dramatic perspective are already gone. So the man dressed in white, going up to the hill and being killed with all the bishops and lay people and religious people, etc. These were the persecutions already passed in the 20th century by communists and Nazis, etc. But it's not the future, don't worry, it's part of the past. Insofar as individual events are described, they belong to the past. So don't worry, and this was what was spread all over the world as being the interpretation of the Secret of Fatima. Last Secret of Fatima foretold attack on Pope. So was referring to the attack that Pope John Paul II received in the hands of this Turkish fellow, but he survived. So Our Lady intervened. So don't worry, it belongs to the past. And secondly, Cardinal Berton, who at the time he was the Undersecretary of State, of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, he said, with anyway, because he admitted that maybe this still refers to the future, in any way, it is an exhortation. It doesn't mean that those events will necessarily happen. So, go to sleep, and don't worry much about it. So, relief among lukewarm Catholics and in secular society. All these perspectives are on the past. We shouldn't worry about. Now, some people start saying, well, if it's just that the Pope will suffer an attack and will survive the attack, etc., why was the secret not disclosed in 1960? If it's just like that. And it's interesting, Cardinal Ratzinger gave an answer to the former vice director of Observatorio Romano. His name was Gianfranco Swiderkowski, who asked him, well, why didn't you reveal it before then? So he said, in 1960, we were at the eve of the Council, the Second Vatican Council. This was in the press conference when they revealed the Third Secret of Fatima and read this official theological interpretation. So we were at the eve of the Council, this great hope of finding a new positive relation between the world and the Church. It's curious because this world is the world of which Our Lady said they are offending God so much that deserves a big punishment. Nevertheless, in the Vatican they were looking for a positive relation, a kind of reconciliation of the Church with modernity. So, a positive relation between the world and the Church, and also of opening a bit the closed doors of communist countries. So they wanted also that diplomatically come to a friendly relation with the communist regimes that were persecuting the Church, like Cardinal Slipi or Cardinal Vincenti. In all these communist countries, the Church was very much persecuted. So the Vatican was interested in trying to extend hands to these communist regimes. And then he said, the same was still valid at the time of Pope Paul VI. So why Paul VI didn't reveal it? We were still digesting, so to speak, the Council and facing so many problems because of the Council and the situation in the world, that this text would not have had its correct place. So basically, you say, well, the text doesn't fit in the atmosphere, psychological atmosphere of optimism, that the Vatican II opened. We will now new positive relation with the world, a new positive relation with the communist regimes. Pope John XXIII received, was the first pope to receive. He received the son-in-law of Khrushchev, who was the head of the Communist Party and president of Russia, so to speak, at the time. And the Communist Party in Italy won immediately 1 million votes. So we look positive relation with all of them. So obviously liberation theology is not totally indifferent of this, because some theologians and priests saw this positive attitude toward communist regimes. They said, well, why we don't use Marxist analysis to judge our society? So basically what Cardinal Ratzinger said in that answer is, revealing the secret in 1960 would hinder the desired reconciliation with the modern world, the Ostpolitik of the Vatican and the policy of openness with the communist regimes, and the implementation of Vatican II directives. But precisely these Vatican II directives were in the line of reconciliating the church with the modern world. So they consider, and obviously if you spread a message speaking about persecutions and destructions, etc., really doesn't fit at all with this atmosphere of optimism they were trying to create in the church regarding the world. So basically the world is not that sinful. This is normal anthropological evolution. We see the crisis in the family, but the crisis in the family is a result of an anthropological evolution. So this will end up by, we will need to give back Christian inspiration to the new society that is coming. That is basically the rhetoric that they were spreading. So the message obviously confronted that optimism directly. But nevertheless, something was clumsy with the Rossi version that the Vatican was trying to spread. First, no private revelation was ever given such solemn and official treatment. So, if this was so menial and insignificant and referring to the past, why to organize such a huge thing and give a 20-page theological analysis of it to say that this belongs to the past? Because basically people will react more or less like an Italian journalist the very day when they spread the secret and the interpretation given by the Vatican said, well, very comforting the words of the Vatican, but those of the Madonna are not so in reality. Secondly, analysts quickly point out some contradictions between that official Rossi version with other known elements. The popes themselves basically saying that really the situation is very bad and God may really punish the world in the future. For instance, just to give one example, this is the speech that Pope John Paul II made in Fatima the 13th of May 1982 when he went there and put the bullet of the attack against him on the crown of Our Lady. And he said, the successor of Peter, this is a very solemn way of speaking, the successor of Peter, reading again with trepidation the ardent appeal of the heart of Mary that resounded at Fatima 65 years ago, sees how many people and societies, how many Christians have gone in the opposite direction to the one indicated in the message of Fatima. He's acknowledging that the situation had even worsened than at the time of Our Lady. Sin has thus made itself firmly at home in the world. So it's not something peripheral to the world. It's at the very heart of our society. What? Sin. And denial of God has become widespread in the ideologies, ideas, and plans of human beings. So, the whole agenda of the modern world is constructed upon the idea of a denial of God. The successor of Peter presents himself here also as a witness to the almost apocalyptic menaces looking over the nations and mankind as a whole. And what is interesting is this speech is 1 year after he escaped from the attack. So how can they say that the secret of Fatima referred to the past and the attack, if 1 year later he was saying that he was seeing almost apocalyptic menaces looking over the nation? So, as it says, something is clumsy. I don't know if clumsy is the right word for that. It doesn't ring very well. No? And there is a contradiction there. Another interesting thing, just 1 year later, they were saying, well, this belongs to the past, the future is rosy, don't worry about it. And 9/11, the attack on the Twin Towers, okay, just 1 year later. So fatally curtailed the dream of a glowing future, because it was the start of another persecution of another form, of which we are suffering now, with dramatic consequence even for Europe because of the flow of refugees now. So the words of the Vatican seemed very contradictory what was really going on. So maybe this idea that it belongs to the past and not to the future is wrong. But the main question was, our if belonged to the past meant that the world had already converted. Because Our Lady has said, at the end, my Immaculate Heart will triumph. And where is the conversion? Well, first, the conversion of Russia is not at all. We were discussing this in the previous meeting, how Russia is the country with the highest rate of abortion in the whole world, per capita abortions in the whole world. On average, a Russian woman has 8 abortions in her life. So it's maybe China is even worse, but we don't know, because in China there are no statistics, basically. But anyway, the conversion of Russia didn't happen, but the conversion of the world, I mean, from the year 2000 until now, in 15, consider how was Ireland in the year 2000, compared with Ireland today. You didn't have homosexual marriage, you didn't have the exception for abortion that you have now, and the pressure for the United Nations to have even more abortions. Probably you didn't have divorce at the time. I don't remember when it changed. 95. 95. Well, you already had divorce. So, and at least you still have structured families and regular education in the schools. All that disappeared. Today don't exist anymore. No? So where is the conversion? All that belonged to the past? It's obviously not. And this basically brings back an interesting conversation. One of the greatest specialists in Fatima, who died already, Father Fuentes, who had a talk with Sister Lucy in 1957, and he told this conversation to a group of nuns in Mexico, and he said that Sister Lucy told him, Father, the Most Holy Virgin is very sad because no one has paid any attention to her message. Neither the good nor the bad. No one. And the first one didn't pay attention were the bishops, the Vatican, and the priests. No. Very few of them speak about. The good continue on their way, but without giving any importance to her message. And the bad, not seeing the punishment of God actually falling upon them, continue their life of sin without even caring about the message. But believe me, Father, God will chastise the world, and this will be in a terrible manner. The punishment from heaven is imminent. It's imminent. You know, God lives in eternity, so what is imminent in God, we don't know how long it takes. No? But the worse the situation becomes, the closest we must feel to this punishment from heaven. So, in reality, now seeing the 20th century, and including the 20th century, our time, the same I explained in the previous talk, how, for instance, the 19th century ended up only at the end of World War I, so in 1918, we could say that we are still in the atmosphere of the 20th century. So it's not the century of communism only, it's really the century of Fatima, because it's this message that explains what happened. The sin that spread throughout the world because of the errors of Russia, and the punishment that we will receive at the hands of Russia because of that. Now it's very interesting, the coincidence of two centenaries. In 1917, there will be the 100 years of the apparitions in Fatima, but also the 500 years of Luther's revolt. And you know, it's very sad that Pope Francis will go to Lund in Sweden to celebrate the gift of the reform. Cardinal Kurt Koch, who is the responsible for the dialogue and ecumenism with the Christian religion, a year ago said there's nothing to celebrate with a sin and revolt and heresies. But nevertheless, the Pope is going. And Cardinal Casper just published a book in Italy about Luther, for the 500 years of Luther, saying that Luther was a prophet. He wasn't heard at the time, and that was the big sin of the church, but Luther was right, and he should be made a father of the church, and his theology. So that indicates how bad the situation inside of the church is. So, and this is interesting, this coincidence, because basically the errors of Russia are the extreme logical conclusions of the Protestant Revolution. The Protestant Revolution consisted in basically free examination of scriptures. I interpret scriptures according to. So there is no hierarchy in the church, there is no magisterium. We don't need to receive the sacraments from the priest. We have direct relations with God. It's totally egalitarian religious conception. There is God, and then all humanity, all equal. There is no visible hierarchy in the church like God, our Lord created. And also, because of this idea of justification, Luther said that the only thing we need is to believe in, have faith in Christ's saving death. So he said, well, don't worry about sinning. Sin strongly, but believe even stronger. So this led to a total immoral, liberal lifestyle. And you see in the Protestant countries, corruption is even worse than in ours. And he himself abandoned his religious vows, marriage, etc., etc. So since then they adopted divorce, etc. So at the core of Protestantism you have egalitarianism and this liberalism, extreme liberalism. It's exactly the core of classical Marxism, or particularly this cultural Marxism that make of the person the builder of his own values. Basically is the same revolt that Lucifer had, non-Serbian, I will not serve God, I am a God to myself, that started at the Protestant Revolution, then passed to the political field with the French Revolution, and then to the social economic into the classical Marxism, and then attained man itself, himself, with the cultural Marxism now. So it's the very same revolution. So the 20th century was then but the final chapter of, in reality, a 5 centuries old revolution. And what Fatima does is announces the collapse of that revolutionary world and the great return to a fully Christian world, a kind of new Middle Ages, represented by these people coming from far away and being sprinkled with the blood of the martyrs. That is precisely the perspective taught by Professor Plinio Correa de Oliveira, the founder of the Brazilian TFP, the first organization to which the Irish Society for Christian Civilization belonged, and in his book, Revolution and Counter-Revolution. I don't know if you have Revolution and Counter-Revolution here in the bookshelf, but in any case, you should, all of you, get a copy and read it, because it explains precisely that. So, what is very interesting is that in spite of the kind of glossing over with pink rose optimistic views by many, in the last 5 years, there was a revival of Fatima again. The perspectives of Fatima coming back. First, Benedict XVI's comment during his trip to Fatima in 2010. He said, "If we would be mistaken to think that Fatima's prophetic mission is complete," I said, "we must pray and convert so that what Our Lady said about the triumph of her Immaculate Heart will be a reality in 1917. Well, definitely that far had not come, but the previous part maybe. The second most interesting element is the book published by the Carmelites of Coimbra, where Sister Lucy lived, with unknown facts of Sister Lucy's life. And the main part, the main revelation there, were the circumstances when Sister Lucy wrote the third secret of Fatima. It's very interesting. She was very anguished. Why? Because Our Lady had told them that was a secret. They could tell only to Francisco, who saw but didn't hear. But no one should know. And then she was receiving, she was sick, very much sick, and was receiving pressure from the bishop of Leiria to write it. So she was in between two duties, to obey the bishop and to obey Our Lady. What to do? She was so anguished that she got sick of this anguish. But one night, she had an apparition of Our Lady. And Our Lady said, "Do what your superiors are telling you to do, to write the secret. But only describe what you saw, not what you understood of it." And so then she knelt, the next day, she knelt and wrote the secret on the bed, on the bed of herself. And a very interesting detail, she closed put in an envelope, but didn't pass on to the superior. Why? Because and the Carmels, they only can do that kind of works on Sunday. So she waited until next Sunday to do that, and explain some details that are very interesting. Wow. But the most important part of what this book by the Carmelites of Coimbra is they describe what our Sister Lucy told them about this apparition. So the nuns are writing, "The Mother of Heaven said to her, to Sister Lucy, 'Be at peace and write what they command you to, but not that which you were given to understand about its meaning.'" So just the description of what you saw. "I felt my spirit flooded by a light-filled mystery, which is God, and in Him I saw and heard." You see the parallel again. In the secret, she saw like in a mirror, because she is seeing the future. So it's not seeing directly. She is seeing in God the future. What she saw? The point of the flame-like lance which detaches. You remember that there was this angel with the sword, and threatening the world. So she saw basically is the flame-like lance, not the sword in this case, touching, detaches. from the lands touches the axis of the earth, and the earth, shakes mountains, cities, towns, and villages. So basically, it's the whole world now. What is remaining? Maybe a farmhouse, very separated from the rest. With their inhabitants are buried. The sea, rivers, and clouds leave their bounds. They overflow, flood, and drag with them into a whirlpool houses and people in a number unable to be counted. This is really apocalyptic. It is the purification of the world from the sin it is immersed in. You see, it's exactly the same central core idea of Fatima. The world is immersed in sin and needs to be purified by a chastisement. In Akita, Our Lady said to this sister that the suffering will be such that the living ones will, the dead ones, they will say, well, I would have preferred to die. So, hatred, ambition cause destructive wars. And that is interesting because put a human element there. Ambitions, hatred, rivalries. God allows that to. So, and this was revealed just a couple of years ago. So, obviously, people who are interested in Fatima, they will say, well, this is the clear indication that the Rossi version, official version, is not true, simply. So we must expect something like that. Another interesting thing, the letter Sister Lucy wrote to Cardinal Caffarra in 1981. Pope John Paul II, seeing the crisis in the family and basically the pressures on the church to accept divorcee people and give them communion and the sacraments and all that, he said, well, we must face this. So he organized and created the John Paul II Institute for the Family in Rome and appointed Cardinal Caffarra as the president, the founder and president of the institute. And it was to be inaugurated the 13th of May, 1981. But during the general audience, what happened? The Pope was killed, was shot at. So the inauguration didn't take place. But then Cardinal Caffarra, he said, well, there is something here, because the 13th of May, etc. So he wrote a letter to Sister Lucy through the bishop, because no one could write to her directly. I said I wasn't expecting at all a reply. And I received a reply. He had not revealed the content of the reply. He has said what the reply said, but that it's in the archives of the Institute, because I put it there. I said, I received a very long letter with her signature, now in the Institute's archive. In it we find written, the final battle between the Lord and the reign of Satan. So basically, the description of the sins of the world is the reign of Satan. That's what is described. Will be about marriage. That it brings you some bells. And the family. Don't be afraid, she added, because anyone who works for the sanctity of marriage and the family will always be fought and opposed in every way, because this is the decisive issue in temporal affairs. Inside of the church is different, but in the world it's obviously that. And then she concluded, however, Our Lady has already crushed its head. So, no matter how terrible the situation gets, we must keep this. The most important thing, Our Lady has already crushed its head. So this will be like the last movement you see when in the bullfights. Sometimes the torero put the sword into the bull, but then the bull start jumping and he could, the torero could be even killed. But these are really the last movement of a dying bull. So this Marxist cultural revolution is more or less in that stage, probably. What perhaps Sister Lucy didn't know was that the battle would mainly be inside the church herself. The battle about marriage and family. Because now, unfortunately, after the two synods and the apostolic exhortation, basically you have the Casper party saying that now remarried, divorcee people, or people living outside of marriage, or even homosexual couples, they can receive communion. So the battle for the defense of marriage and family now is in the church. In the past, the whole church was defending marriage, the sanctity of marriage, and family based on indissoluble marriage. But it's not the case anymore. So, to conclude, which is the definitive seal of the dramatic but encouraging prophecies of Fatima? The Lord at times offers us some spiritual direction to guide us through the darkest periods of history. Know that God sent private revelations not to add anything to the faith, because the faith is completed. We have the deposit is completed with the death of the last apostle. The Apocalypse is the last book of Revelation, and so is concluded, but can give private revelations to orient us in periods of darkness, like the prophets did for the Jewish people. In a moment of crisis, God sent prophets. In this case, God sent his own mother to be the prophet. But with the prophecies happens something interesting, that the opposite is also true, that the dramatic unfolding of the historical events help us to understand the significance of the prophecy. We see that very much in the Gospel of St. John, because all the time he said, and our Lord this and that, and these two confirm what the prophet said about the resurrection, about a lot of things. The events confirm the prophecy, and so the events help us to understand the meaning, the deep meaning of the prophecy. And this is the case with Fatima, where also not only the crisis in the world, but the crisis in the church help us to understand the ultimate meaning of the secret of Fatima. And we must particularly understand the last part of what Sister Lucy said to Cardinal Caffarra, or what Our Lady said to the three seers. At the end, my Immaculate Heart will triumph. Satan has already been defeated. And repeating for ourselves the last words that Sister Lucy heard in this apparition in 1944 before writing The Secret. She said the following: afterward, I felt in the increased beating of my heart. You can imagine she is seeing all this, the angel touching the axis of the earth, and all the whole earth burning, cities, villages, etc. And then after all the rivers flooding and all this, her heart was beating dramatically. So I said, I felt in the increased beating of my heart, and in my spirit, a quiet voice which said, in time, one faith, one baptism, one church, holy, Catholic, apostolic, heaven in eternity. This is very interesting, because that shows that in the core of these events, dramatic events, what will be probably the appearances will try to tell to us, well, the Catholic Church doesn't exist anymore. No? Probably it was divided in so many, you see, about this Amoris Laetitia, for instance, Robert Stemann, maybe the greatest philosopher today in the world, a very good friend of Pope John Paul II, he said, well, unfortunately, the apostolic exhortation and this real or imaginary authorization for divorcees to receive communion will indeed provoke a schism in the church. No? Because we will have some episcopates, like the German episcopate, allowing, they are already doing this, giving communion to anyone, and in the border, the Polish episcopate saying, no, here we abide for the traditional discipline of the church, and the public sinner cannot receive communion. So we have two, you just cross the border, and you have a different church, basically. So we may be, at one moment, be in a position where we say, well, where is the Catholic Church? No, don't worry, one church. The reform is not a gift. One church. Holy, Catholic, Apostolic. And heaven in eternity. So, even if we pass for very terrible sacrifices, what is waiting for us is God Himself with merciful arms. This word, heaven, filled my heart with peace and happiness, so much so that almost without realizing it, I continued to repeat for some time, heaven, heaven. So this was the perspective that gave her courage to cross all the trials. So we must have this in mind. Whatever may happen in the coming months or years, we must be certain that this was already foreseen and that our Lord already promised that in the end, so that after many trials and sacrifice, my Immaculate Heart will triumph. And we can collaborate with this triumph with our prayers, penance, and practicing of the 5 first sacraments. Thank you very much.